How's it going, everyone? Nick Templin here from Templin Scouting, and today we get to do the Chicago Blackhawks. So this should be a pretty interesting one. They've definitely got some work to do, but I do believe that they still have the opportunity to compete before guys like Keith, Kane, and Taze retire if they put the right pieces together. Obviously, there's going to be a question mark in net. We're going to bring Soderblom down. He's not going to be playing for them next year. So it'll be between Colin Delia, Malcolm Subban, and Kevin Lankinen. So Kevin Lankinen was definitely the best of the three this season. Delia would probably actually be the odd one out. So we will bring Delia down to the minors. Lankinen had a really good season. So hopefully he can have a great sophomore season as well, and even kind of take another step forward for them. Looking at some of their defensemen here, they've got way more than they need up here right now, so we're going to send Baudin down into the minors. I swear I can pronounce French names, it's just that one came out wrong. Alec Regula will bring down Wyatt Kaliniuk. We can bring down as well. We'll probably bring somebody else in to be the scratch defenseman for this team. We're also going to bring Bachvist up to the top pairing, leave Mitchell there, bring Connor Murphy down to play with Riley Stillman. And then from there, we just got to look at a few things. So a couple of things we're going to do. So Seabrook and Shaw, they've both retired. We can leave them a long-term injured reserve, but I do expect Jonathan Taze to be back next season, so we can throw him back on the squad. That leaves us with $19 million in cap space, which is not something that Chicago's really had for a long time. Obviously, that comes from partly the fact that not all these players they don't have like the full minor squad signed right now, but overall this is a good situation for them to be in. So I'm going to bring Borgstrom up. I do think that he has a pretty good chance of making the team next season. I'm going to bring Mike Hardman down. They only played him in the NHL because they just signed him from the NCAA. Probably not going to be a regular guy in the lineup. So looking at this team, first of all, Dylan Strome probably going to be a winger, or Kirby Dach could become a winger as well, because I don't see either one of these guys being a third liner for this team. So I'm going to go ahead and put Kirby Dach there. And then let's take a look at some of the guys that they need to re-sign this offseason. So taking a look at their unrestricted free agents first. So Vinny Hinostroza is a guy that they could bring back. I think that it would make sense for them to do that, but at the same time, I don't think they need to. They can kind of look elsewhere to fill that roster spot. Other than that, Zach Smith, I think, was hurt, didn't play at all last season. Don't think he'll get another contract. Brandon Peary, don't think they're going to bring him back either. So looking at the restricted free agents they have to sign, they got Josh Dickinson. For the purpose of this video, I'm not going to re-sign him, but I do think that that's a guy they will probably qualify and try to bring back. So the most important one that I see here is actually Brandon Hagel. So I'm going to go ahead and get him a contract just over $1 million. Actually, he could probably make a bit more than that. He's been relatively productive for them in their bottom six lines. So let's get him on $2.5 million for 3 years. Would be potentially a steal if he keeps kind of moving forward. Other guys, Pius Sutter looked really good last season, so we'll get him back at probably just under $3 million if I had to guess. So let's just look, make sure that's right. Yeah, that's right. On 2 years. So they're almost going to run into a situation where they have too many players that they want to play that they're not going to always be able to play, because Pius Sutter is definitely going to be, probably in that third line center role. Borgstrom probably becomes a scratch in that situation. And we're not done there, because I do think that they're also going to bring back Adam Gaudette, who they acquired from Vancouver at the deadline last season. So, potential deal for him just over, $1.5 million for, 2 years is probably 1 year. See what he can do. Then there's Nikita Zadorov, another guy that they're going to want to re-sign. So just figuring out a deal for him. So probably around the same what he was already making. So maybe he makes just slightly more. And they get him on a 2-year deal. So that leaves us with $9 million in cap space. There's still one more player that I do want them to re-sign here. However, I do have plans for Alexander Nylander. I don't think he's ready to play in the NHL yet, or at least when I look at this squad right now, I don't see a spot for him. So looking at potentially, he hasn't really done much so far, so he hasn't earned $1 million contract just yet, but they could potentially sign him to 2 years at just under $1 million, and then they could look to package him in some sort of a trade. So we can take a look at that potentially. Looking at any other guys that they might potentially want to trade, Kubalik might be a guy that they look into just because he is in the last year of his deal, and if he has kind of a breakout year, they might not be able to afford him next summer. We will see. They're also going to have to re-sign Kirby Dach next summer, so they're definitely going to have some cap room for that. Dylan Strome's going to get a new contract. He's probably going to get more than what he's making now. So one of those things they kind of have to look into. So I think we will actually look to potentially move both these guys in one trade. Actually, before I do look at a trade, I do want to take a look in here, see if there's anyone that anyone from their reserve list that they might want to sign. Potentially Alex Vlasic, but I don't think he'll be in the NHL yet. So if they did sign him, he would play in the minors, and that would probably be at the end of the NCAA season next year. So yeah, we'll just go ahead and look at potential trades. Find a team that might want Dominic Kubalik, who was I think just under 30 goal scorer not too long ago. So he definitely has a lot of upside. Hasn't looked as good since that. I think it was his rookie season when he did that. So obviously got to keep that in mind when evaluating him. So looking at some of the teams that could potentially be interested in these two players, we could look at the Islanders here. Because there's a potential deal that they could swing involving Michael Dal-Cole, who is a former first-round pick who definitely hasn't turned out the way that that they had hoped at all, really. And then, get I don't think they could get a first-round pick here. They might be able to get a second-round pick. So I think that's the deal that they'll try and swing here, is just Nylander and Kubalik for Dal-Cole and a second-round pick. Here, just to free up some cap space for next offseason. Bring in a guy who, if given more ice time, might be able to prove himself, but potentially not. And you're also trading away a guy in Alexander Nylander who hasn't really shown the potential that everyone believes that he does still have. And they're also acquiring that 2022 second-round pick, which could potentially become a solid roster player in the future. So looking at what we are left with at this point, so we will re-sign Dal-Cole just because he can be a nice 13th, 14th forward on this team. So we'll just give him a similar deal to what we just signed Nylander to, and then throw him as a scratch right there. As for defensemen, we can throw, I think, Riley Stillman as the scratch there. I do think that he might be better than Connor Murphy, but I think Connor Murphy has also been pretty solid there. I do like Riley Stillman a lot. I think he's a solid NHL defenseman, so I don't think that he'd be out of the lineup a whole lot. But yeah, so we'll just slide Ian Mitchell, Connor Murphy. They're both right-handed defensemen, but I do think that Zadorov is better off playing with Dahan than playing on the third pairing there. So not a lot of moves that actually have to be made for this team this offseason if they want to potentially compete next year. I'm actually just going to move Brett Connolly there, move Hagel there, and there we go. That's, I mean, you know, maybe they want to improve on Brett Connolly. That's something they could potentially look at this summer to get somebody else in there in their top 6, because otherwise this top 6 looks really solid to me. Bottom 6 is really solid too. You know, they've got good offense from Kurashev, Suter, and Hagel, and then, you know, good defensive forwards in Gaudette and Whistle and Carpenter there. If Duncan Keith can kind of return to form at least a little bit, and if Bachfist has a breakout year next year, you know, who knows what could really happen, because you never know. You could see Bachfist have like an Adam Fox type year, or like a, you know, maybe not Cale Makar, but, you know, Quinn Hughes even, with a bit more defense to back it up. You know, overall, this team definitely has the potential to be a playoff team next year. In fact, I think without injuries, they might have been able to do that this year. Of course, they were in a weaker division where most of the bottom teams that made the playoffs, like Nashville, just kind of barely squeaked in. So, you know, obviously going back into regular divisions next year, they're going to have more difficulty trying to compete. But don't be surprised to see this team potentially compete if all the pieces do fall into place for them. So I know that this one wasn't a super exciting one with any massive moves or anything, but I think for Chicago, that's kind of how they have to keep this summer, is just kind of low key. Don't overdo it, because I think next summer is when they can really make the big moves that they need to make to potentially return to being a contender, while still having Jonathan Toews and Patrick Kane and Duncan Keith all as a part of the team. And then 2 years from now, all those guys, their contracts will be up. It'll be interesting to see where they end up, because I don't see all of them returning at the end of their contracts. And we'll see definitely a new Chicago Blackhawks, main core in that time. So definitely going to be an interesting couple of years for the Blackhawks at this point. But for now, this is how I see their off-season going. If you like this video, please consider giving it a like and consider subscribing. Comment down below what you think of my moves, and I will see you guys all in the next video.